Morning by the Window is a fresh means of expression that depicts a world that was unlike anything that had gone before. Written by T.S. Eliot a few months after the outbreak of World War I in 1914, this 9-line-long poem describes the narrator looking down from his window at the otherwise depressing depiction of the streets below. But in order to prove that Morning by the Window is a new outlook of expression, we have to skim through previous literary movements and their takes of the world for reference. While we go through, we can eliminate some errors. Neoclassicism was all about the classics, classical art, theatre, music, architecture, and so on. Revolutionary consisted of political speeches yearning freedom and loyalty. Religion was also elaborated on. Romanticism expanded on imagination and emotion. Their worlds were bursting with fantasy and drama. American Romanticism was mainly fictional as opposed to poetry, and dabbled in history. Victorian literature drew from aspects of Romanticism, but started to spotlight the darker perspectives of life. Transcendental worlds wrote about abstract nouns that transcended what you could see, hear, taste, touch, and feel. Realism focused on the simplicity of daily life as a whole, which included even the darker sides of life. Its worlds were often associated with dullness. So now that we've established a basis comparative, let's now analyze our text. And along the trampled edges of the street, I am aware of the damp souls of housemaids. Visual imagery is used as the author is simply observing the scenery from the window. His awareness of the damp souls of the housemaids and the trampled edges of the street add to the overall gloomy feel of his surroundings. Note that this poem is conducted of correlatives that are devoid of emotion, meant to communicate to the reader that the narrator is looking down at the poor area of the city. It is aimed to provoke a feeling of sympathy within readers, despite his emotionless descriptions. This can be linked to the notion of individuality through means of the absence of emotional language, as its presence sways readers towards a specific biased conclusion of an author using it. Transcendentalism similarly embraced individuality, as it believed that women and men were equal in terms of possessing the capability of having thoughts that transcended beyond physicality. Relating to this, it also rebelled against society and religion, as its uniform ideals opposed transcendental beliefs. In other words, modernism and transcendentalism share very similar concepts. However, Morning by the Window is unique because transcendental works were predominantly immersed in spiritual conventions, whereas our modernist text explores both what the mind holds and how it relates to what is physical, which in this case is social hierarchy, which destroys individualism and its emphasized poverty. The brown waves of fog toss up to me, twisted faces from the bottom of the street. Through using representation, a rather dystopian setting is established. The brown waves of the fog represents pollution, which is linked to the corruption of the city. The life of a city is made up of the people occupying it, which in this case, the people at the bottom of the street have twisted faces, which translate to the fact that they're poor. Social evils are observed here, which is shown through these unfortunate people. Investigating the grittier side of society is not new and has been explored in previous movements before, such as realism. Realism is very similar to everything Morning by the Window is about, as it focuses on what life has to offer, including poverty, without the sugarcoating. However, Morning by the Window can still be considered a new outlook of expression because it explores the world that World War I influenced, and therefore is depicted with a grimmer backstory, whereas realism focuses on life before the war, when simplicity of daily life thrived. This can also be linked to the notion of mortality. From here, we can conclude that Morning by the Window is a fresh new means of expression, not only because it does not correlate with previous depictions of the world, but also because it can be considered a Frankenstein of limbs taken from Victorian, transcendentalist, and realist literature shaped by the experience of World War I into an entirely new perspective of the earth we live in.